People like to talk about fresh starts, like they're easy things to find. Quit your job, move somewhere new, reinvent yourself. Every motivational poster in every gas station bathroom promises you that. But I'd tried that, again and again, and at 29, standing in the Arizona sun with my car coughing smoke and my bank account gasping its last breath, I'd learned the truth. Fresh starts weren't fresh, they were just new flavors of failure. My name's Luke Mendez, and my life's been a series of jobs that never stuck. I tried being a mechanic's apprentice, lasted 6 months. Boss said I was too distracted, never quick enough with the tools. Warehouse loader, wrecked my back on the job, they let me go the next week, like I was just another broken pallet. Security guard at a strip mall, walked out after catching my supervisor skimming from the registers and being told to shut the hell up if you want to keep your job. Bartender at a dive on Route 66. That ended when I started drinking more than I was serving. I wasn't lazy, I wasn't stupid, but there's something about a man who doesn't fit. Employers smell it on you like oil on your skin. They can tell you're not built for settling down, and they don't want to invest in someone who's already halfway out the door. Each job ended in another failure. Each failure left me with more debt, fewer friends, and more nights staring at my cracked ceiling wondering how the hell I'd ended up here. My father used to call me the drifter, said I was like tumbleweed, rolling, never landing anywhere worth a damn. He wasn't wrong. I found the flyer at a dusty pit stop outside Winslow, Arizona. I wasn't even supposed to stop there. I was just out of gas, coasting on fumes. There was a bulletin board outside the station. The kind with curling ads for missing dogs, church bake sales, and one faded poster begging folks to vote for a sheriff who'd probably been dead 10 years. Tucked between them was a paper so yellowed it looked like it had been stapled there since the desert was young. Nightshift help wanted. Local diner $35 hour. Cash paid. Apply in person. $35 an hour. I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Most jobs I'd scraped together barely hit half that. This was salvation. Handwritten directions were scribbled at the bottom. No phone number, no website. Just take the highway west. When the mesas line up, turn left at the marker stone. Drive until you see the sign. Sounded like something out, a ghost story. But I tore it off the board like it was a winning lottery ticket. The directions led me down a stretch of highway I'd never taken before. The desert opened up wide and empty, red dirt stretching forever, the sun baking the earth until it looked like the whole world was bleeding. For 40 minutes, I didn't see a soul. No houses, no trucks, no other cars, just me, my dying Corolla, and that endless desert. Then I saw it, a squat building squatting in the middle of nowhere. Neon buzzing faintly against the sky, though the sign was cracked and half dead. Red Sky Diner. The letters flickered, buzzing like a dying insect. The parking lot was cracked, weeds poking through like veins. A payphone leaned against the wall outside, so old and sun-bleached it looked like it might collapse if you breathed on it. The diner wasn't just remote. It felt forgotten. Inside, it looked ordinary enough. Booths with torn red vinyl patched in duct tape. A counter with chipped formica. The smell of burnt coffee and grease lingering in the air. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he hadn't smiled in 20 years. Heavy-set, graying hair, deep sunken eyes the color of old cigarettes. He didn't ask who I was. Didn't ask for a resume. "You here for the night shift?" he asked flatly. "Yeah, saw the flyer." He gave me a long, tired look, then reached under the counter and pulled out a folded sheet of yellowed paper. He laid it down in front of me. No questions about experience, no handshake, just that. "You start tonight, read the rules, follow them, you'll be fine." And with that he walked into the back, leaving me alone with the paper. The sheet smelled faintly of smoke, edges curled like it had been burned. The words were typed in uneven ink, as if they'd been punched out on some ancient typewriter. 7 rules for the night shift. 1. Never answer if you hear your name after 12:17 a.m. Before that, it might still be human. After that, it never is. 2. The back door must be locked by 12:45 a.m. and never opened until dawn. If it rattles, press your hand against it. Do not release until the noise stops. 3. Between 3:03 and 3:33 a.m., do not look into mirrors. They belong to something else during that time. 4. If a customer asks for black coffee after 2:15 a.m., serve it quickly and without a word. Do not take payment. Do not look at their hands. 5. At 4:11 a.m., scratching will begin under the floor. Ignore it. Cover your ears if you must. Do not acknowledge it aloud. 6. Do not touch the payphone after dark. If it rings, let it. If it calls your name, cut the cord with the knife taped under the counter. 7. If the jukebox plays between 1:44 to 1:47 a.m., leave the diner immediately. Don't look back. Don't take the road north. I read the list twice, then a third time. Cryptic, ridiculous, like someone had mashed together ghost stories, urban legends, and sleep deprivation hallucinations, but the paper felt heavy in my hand, like it carried more weight than it should. I laughed anyway. Couldn't help it. This was my big break, a list of rules straight out of a campfire story. Then I remembered the $35 an hour. And I thought, screw it, I've worked worse jobs for less money. That was how I ended up in the Deadlands, standing in a diner that shouldn't exist, clutching a set of rules that made no sense at all. I should have walked out, driven back to Winslow, found another dead-end job. But $35 an hour is $35 an hour. And that was the night I sold myself to the diner. I told myself the night shift would be easy, pour coffee, wipe counters, maybe chat with a trucker or two. $35 an hour for a quiet diner in the middle of nowhere sounded like a dream. But as soon as the sun dipped behind the mesas, I realized the desert has a way of swallowing your optimism whole. By 7 p.m., the diner was empty. The last few truckers had rolled out hours ago, their headlights fading like fireflies. The neon sign flickered weakly, buzzing in time with the beat of my own heartbeat. Every shadow seemed heavier than it should be, clinging to the corners like wet cloth. I went over the rules again, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. Never answer if you hear your name after 12:17 a.m. 12:17 a.m. I rolled it around in my head. It was specific, too specific. Why not midnight? Why not 1? I shook it off, overthinking. Probably. The back door must be locked by 12:45 a.m. I wandered to the back. Old wood, warped from sun and rain, creaked under my touch as I latched the deadbolt. My reflection in the glass looked hollow, tired, but that was normal, right? Around 10 p.m., the first customer drifted in. He was tall, skinny, face half hidden in a hat pulled low. No one else would have noticed, but I did. He didn't speak, didn't need to. He just slid onto a stool at the counter and stared at the menu like it was written in another language. I poured a cup of black coffee. His hand hovered over the cup, but he didn't say a word. I slid it down the counter. He nodded once and disappeared into the empty booth near the jukebox. I blinked again, then turned. The booth was empty. Okay. Weird, I muttered, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light. Around 11:30 p.m., I caught the first subtle signs. A scratching under the floorboards. The paper said to ignore it. I did. But my ears rang, my heart hammered, and every muscle in my body screamed at me to look. I didn't. I kept wiping counters, telling myself it was rats, mice, anything but what I feared. 12:17 a.m. came faster than I expected. At first, silence. Then, faintly, from somewhere outside, or maybe in my own head, I heard it. Luke. I froze. The diner felt suddenly smaller, the shadows closer. My stomach dropped. The voice was soft, familiar, like my mother. I didn't answer. I couldn't. It repeated once, twice, each time closer, louder, right outside the window this time. Don't answer. The rule repeated itself in my head. Do not answer. I pressed my hands against the counter and didn't move. The voice faded. 3:03 a.m. That's when the mirror rule hit. I walked to the kitchen to wash a cup, passing the tiny restroom mirror. My reflection lingered for a beat too long, then it blinked. Before I did, I froze. The reflection smiled, not me. Something wrong about it. Sharp teeth, eyes glinting just slightly too bright. I turned and fled back to the counter. The diner was silent. Too silent. My own breathing sounded loud, echoing off the Formica. Around 3:50 a.m., the payphone rang. I didn't touch it. The rule said not to, but the shrill metallic scream of the receiver sounded familiar. My name whispered through the line, my own voice. Screaming, desperate, I fell back against the counter, heart hammering. It's a trick. Must be a trick. But I couldn't ignore it. My hands shook. I nearly reached for the knife under the counter, the one the rules hinted I might need. Then the line went dead. I tried to keep busy, wiping tables, sweeping the floor, convincing myself I was imagining things. Then, exactly at 1:44 a.m., the jukebox sputtered to life. Music. Not a song I recognized, something low, twisted like a carnival organ playing underwater. I froze. The paper said, "Leave immediately, don't look back. Don't take the road north." I grabbed my jacket, ready to bolt, but curiosity, or stupidity, made me glance at the booth where the first customer had been. Empty. Just empty. I hesitated. Then rationalized maybe I should wait until the music stops. I was being paranoid, but the tune didn't stop. It grew louder, scraping against my nerves. Shadows danced across the walls like they had lives of their own. I made my choice. I bolted to the door, forgetting the rules, not caring which road I took. The door swung open. Cold desert wind hit me like a slap. The diner behind me flickered, lights stretching and bending in impossible ways. The mesas loomed like jagged teeth. I ran across the cracked parking lot, feeling the sand shift underfoot, every step echoing like it was chasing me. I didn't look back. The jukebox shrieked behind me. The diner's neon sign flickered wildly, and for the first time, I understood. The rules weren't there to keep me safe. They were instructions, rituals. If I failed them, something would come. I ran until my legs burned, until the horizon swallowed me in black. By the time I stopped, lungs heaving, my shirt soaked in sweat, the desert was silent. Too silent. The diner was gone, or maybe I had never really been there in the first place, but I could still hear the scratching under my feet, and I knew the night had only just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I tried lying in my car, windows cracked against the desert chill, but every rustle of sand, every whisper of wind through the mesas sounded like someone, or something, moving just behind me. By sunrise, I told myself I was being ridiculous. The desert plays tricks, shadows bend in strange ways. Maybe the diner was abandoned. Maybe the flyer had been a cruel joke. But the rules were still in my pocket, the paper smelling faintly of smoke and old ink. I hadn't burned it, hadn't destroyed it, not yet, and deep down, I didn't want to. Even in the daylight, the diner looked wrong. The neon flicker from last night was gone, replaced with sunlight bouncing off chipped formica and cracked windows. The payphone leaned at a crooked angle, like it had been slapped there by some unseen hand. The first day passed slowly. No customers. No one came in. The rules didn't seem to matter until the clock crept past 12:17 a.m. That night, things started subtle. At 12:16 a.m., I heard it first, a voice calling my name. Not my mother this time, something lower, raspier, just at the edge of comprehension. Luke, Luke. I didn't answer. The paper's first rule rang in my head. Never answer if you hear your name after 12:17 a.m. I waited. The voice stopped when the clock ticked over. Relief washed over me, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost spilled a pot of coffee. Then I noticed something strange. The rules themselves, they had changed. At the bottom of the page, a new line appeared in ink I hadn't seen before. Rule 8. Trust no one wearing your face. I stared at it, shoved it into my pocket, tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. Maybe stress, lack of sleep, maybe the desert was poisoning me somehow. Then the diner started filling with people. Not many, but enough to make me nervous. Each one, Wrong. A man in a dark hat who sat at the counter and ordered black coffee without speaking. When I slid it down, he vanished. A woman in a faded dress staring into the mirror by the restroom. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and they didn't blink when she did. A group of teenagers laughing too loud in a booth. When I turned to glance again, it was just an empty table. I could feel the rules pressing against me. Following them suddenly felt vital. The desert night stretches time in ways that don't make sense. Clocks spun backward. Shadows moved against logic. The paper now seemed alive. I would glance at it, and sometimes the letters would tremble, as if breathing. I was starting to fear that the diner itself had rules, not just the paper. It had rhythm, a pulse, a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. Scratching began at 4:11 a.m. The paper warned me. I covered my ears, pretended it wasn't there, but the sound was relentless, like nails over bone. I thought of reaching for the knife under the counter. Almost did, but the thought froze me. Am I supposed to, or am I supposed to survive? Around 3:30 a.m., I thought I saw myself in the corner booth. Same jacket, same tired eyes, same haunted posture. My reflection shouldn't be there. But there he was, watching me, smiling wrong. I blinked, gone. And the rules whispered their secret: trust no one wearing your face. The thought hit me like a hammer. The diner, it's not normal. I'm not normal, and maybe nothing here is. By the end of that night, I was sweating, shaking, and exhausted. I'd learned 3 things. 1, the rules are real. Breaking them brings consequences. 2, time is not linear in this place. Certain minutes have weight. 3, I am being watched. Constantly. And maybe I am not the first. When I stepped outside, the desert stretched endlessly. The mesas seemed closer, jagged and alive, and the neon sign flickered faintly as if breathing. I wanted to drive away, run forever into nothing, but something held me. Something told me the diner would not let me go. I drove to the edge of the mesas, headlights cutting through sand and shadow. The diner disappeared behind me, swallowed by distance, or maybe it had never really been there. I didn't sleep again that day, not really. Every shadow in my apartment, every wind through the air vents sounded like the diner calling me back. And I realized something terrifying. The night has only begun, and I am already inside the rules. The desert has a way of making you feel small, and by the 4th night, I was nothing but a twitching nerve at the edge of a long, endless void. The diner no longer felt like a building. It felt alive, watching, waiting, feeding on my mistakes. I arrived before sunset. The mesas glowed red in the last light, but I barely looked. I didn't want to see what was coming. My hands shook as I grabbed the rules from my jacket pocket. They felt heavier than ever, the letters crawling faintly like ants. Rule 8, trust no one wearing your face. I read it again, muttering under my breath. I didn't understand it, but I was starting to feel it. It was 12:50 a.m. when I saw it properly. The back door rattled violently, more than usual. I froze. The paper said the back door must be locked by 12:45 a.m. and never opened until dawn. If it rattles, press your hand against it. Do not release until the noise stops. I pressed my hand against the warped wood. The rattling didn't stop. My fingers burned, sweat slipping down my palms. And then I felt a weight pushing from the other side, something strong, hungry, wanting in. A voice whispered, low, gravelly, like gravel scraping metal, "Luke." I didn't answer. The door shook violently, splinters snapping under pressure. Then, silence. When I pulled back my hand, a thin line of blood traced my palm. Not from splinters. Something else. Something sharp, cold. They began arriving all at once, not human, not fully. A man with his face obscured by a cracked cowboy hat. When he moved, his limbs bent wrong, elbows and knees twisting as if gravity didn't exist. A woman in a faded sundress, her hair hanging over her face like liquid shadows. When she smiled, teeth too sharp, eyes too big, my stomach churned. Children laughing in a corner booth. I glanced away, then back. They had no eyes, just hollow sockets. Every time I saw them, the rules whispered, "Don't look, serve, don't answer." I poured black coffee for the man at the counter without a word. He slid the cup back toward me, vanished, leaving nothing behind but the smell of burnt sugar. 3:03 a.m. I avoided the mirrors. My reflection might have betrayed me anyway, but I could feel it watching, stretching behind the glass, waiting. 3:17 a.m. The jukebox sputtered. Music low, twisted, mechanical. I froze. The rules said 1:44 to 1:47 a.m. for jukebox escape. Wrong time, I thought. But something in the notes of that song made me clench my teeth. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching taller than the ceiling. 4:11 a.m. The scratching began, louder, faster, beneath my feet, not just under the floorboards anymore. It felt inside the earth itself. I pressed my ears to my chest, willing it to stop. It didn't. And then I saw him, sitting in the corner booth, my jacket, my hair, my tired eyes. He smiled at me. Wrongly. The kind of smile that makes you question everything you thought you knew about your own face. "Luke," he said. My voice, my tone, exactly. I ran. Tried to escape, but the diner's walls stretched, warped, the exit never where it should have been. My pulse raced. My breath came in ragged gasps. I tripped, fell, and when I looked up, he was closer, moving like a shadow across the floor. My own shadow, my own twin. Rule 8 flashed in my mind: trust no one wearing your face. By the end of that night, the paper was different. Letters shifting, new words forming as if alive. Rule 9, do not resist. Accept your place. I could feel the diner pulling me in, bending me into something not quite human, not quite me. And that's when I realized something horrifying. The rules weren't meant to protect me. They were meant to trap me, to shape me, to erase me. I stumbled outside into the desert, wind cutting against me, sand in my eyes. The diner seemed impossibly far, but I could feel it. The pulse, the hunger, the waiting. I had survived this night, somehow, but I knew the rules weren't done with me, not by a long shot. By the 5th night, I wasn't just scared, I was changed. Every nerve in my body screamed in constant warning. Every shadow seemed heavier, as if it carried weight, as if it breathed. I was no longer just Luke Mendez. I was a target, a piece in some larger monstrous game. The diner itself was shifting. The counters groaned like the boards were moving beneath the grease and formica. The ceiling lights dimmed, brightened, then flickered out in sequence, creating a staccato rhythm of dark and light that made me dizzy. Even the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, as if the building was inhaling and exhaling, tasting my fear. I ran my hands over the back counter. It was sticky, warm, not from coffee, something else, something alive. They arrived in waves. I began to recognize the pattern. Every minute after 12:17 a.m., after I ignored the name-calling, the diner would summon them. A man with animalistic eyes, limbs bending in impossible directions. He whispered my failures back to me, laughing with teeth too sharp, a grin too wide. A woman with a mask of my mother's face, smiling cruelly, speaking in my father's voice. You can't escape, Luke. Children who ran on all fours, their laughter echoing and distorting, coming from all directions at once. Each time, my pulse spiked. My heart thumped like a hammer against my ribcage. The rules were all I had. 3:33 a.m. came, and the mirrors called to me. I didn't look, not at the bathroom mirror, not at the shattered glass in the corner, but I felt them behind the glass, watching, grinning, breathing my name into nothing. 3:17 a.m. The jukebox sputtered and played again, a twisted, warped melody that didn't exist in any songbook I knew. Shadows stretched across the walls like crawling hands, trying to touch me, pull me into the booth where the doppelganger had been. 4:11 a.m. The scratching began under the floor again, louder, faster, clawing like something trying to dig its way up into my chest. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound vibrated inside my bones. Then he appeared again, my twin, standing in the doorway to the kitchen, leaning against the frame. Luke, You shouldn't have ignored the rules. Same voice, same face, same weary eyes. Only the smile was wrong, too wide, too cruel. I stumbled backward. I reached for the knife under the counter. My hands shook violently. I could barely lift it. The paper in my pocket whispered a new warning. Rule 10, do not resist the shape of yourself. I froze. My twin laughed. It echoed, my own voice mocking me. The diner seemed to lean closer, walls creaking, floors groaning. I realized the rules weren't protection. They were instructions, rituals, and the diner had been waiting for me to arrive. By 5 a.m., reality was unraveling. The diner was no longer a diner. It was a maze. Booths twisted into hallways. Lights stretched and bent like liquid. Shadows moved independently, some crawling on the ceiling, some slipping along the floor. Everything, every sound, every shape, every smell was a test, a trap, a sentence. The doppelganger moved with the shadows, always a step ahead, always knowing. And I was running out of rules. I realized then that the desert wasn't outside, it was inside. Every gust of wind, every shift of sand was connected to the diner. The mesas were watching. The rules weren't protecting me from the desert, they were keeping the desert at bay. And if I failed, I would be consumed. I ran. I didn't know where. North, south. The jukebox screamed behind me. My own voice screamed through the payphone. Shadows clawed at me. And then I remembered the final rule I had ignored last night. The jukebox. 1:44 to 1:47 a.m. Leave immediately. Don't look back. Don't take the road north. I bolted toward the east, toward the mesas. The desert swallowed me in darkness, sand whipping my face. Behind me, the diner howled, bending, twisting, shouting my name in voices not my own. I didn't stop running, not until my lungs burned, my legs ached, and the first pale hint of dawn lit the mesas in ghostly pink. When I finally looked back, the diner was gone. The desert stretched empty, silent, as if it had never existed. I collapsed on the sand, exhausted, bleeding, trembling. $35 an hour had nearly killed me. But I survived, for now. And I knew something worse was waiting. The diner would come back, it always does. By the sixth night, I had begun to understand a terrifying truth. The diner wasn't just a building. It was a living trap. A maze that shifted its own walls, ceilings, and floors in ways that made no sense. It was designed to break you, to twist your perception, to remake you into something it could control. I stepped inside at dusk. The air felt thicker than ever, heavy with the scent of grease, dust, and something I couldn't identify, like iron mixed with burnt flesh. The Formica counter groaned as I set down my jacket. The booths weren't where they had been last night. One wall had extended several feet. The bathroom mirror now reflected a hallway that shouldn't exist. The payphone, leaning against the wall outside yesterday, was now in the corner by the kitchen. The diner was alive, and it knew I was awake. I pulled out the paper. Trembling hands, the letters were shifting again. Some words had disappeared, others had appeared. Rule 11, you are never alone. Watch yourself. Rule 12, mirrors lie, but sometimes they speak the truth. I shivered. The diner had its own language now. It wasn't just giving me instructions, it was communicating, waiting for me to make a mistake. They came at me in increasing numbers, not fully human, not fully beast. A man whose face melted and reformed into a grotesque mockery of my own. A woman with long dark hair crawling across the ceiling, whispering every insecurity I'd ever had. Children running on all fours, voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus of laughter and screaming. I ran between booths, trying to serve black coffee to those who asked, following the rules as best I could. Each action felt like a life or death decision. Every time I failed, even slightly, the diner shifted. Floors tilted, walls pressed closer, shadows reaching toward me like they wanted to drag me into the air. Then he appeared. My twin, my reflection, my shadow, my enemy, Luke, he said, voice exactly like mine, smiling cruelly. I tried to strike him with the knife. My hand passed through him. Air. Nothing. He laughed. You can't win, he said. You're already part of it. I stumbled backward. My knees hit the floor. The diner groaned. The walls stretched and twisted, light bending unnaturally. And then I saw them, dozens of versions of myself, flickering in the corners of my vision. Each one screaming, crying, laughing. Rule 8, trust no one wearing your face. Rule 10, do not resist the shape of yourself. I didn't know which me to trust, which me was real. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. I lost all sense of time. Every clock, every watch in the diner had stopped. The paper in my pocket seemed to breathe in rhythm with my heart. 3:03, 3:33 a.m. again. Mirrors called to me, some whispering, some screaming. I didn't look. I couldn't. 1:44, 1:47 a.m. again. The jukebox played. A twisted carnival song, each note stabbing into my skull. Shadows stretched to my legs. I didn't wait. I bolted. 4:11 a.m. The scratching under the floor now seemed inside my chest. I pressed my palms to my face, trying not to scream. The diner itself tried to swallow me. Hallways extended endlessly. Booths became corridors. Doors disappeared. I felt the walls breathing, pulsing, alive. And then finally, I remembered something from the rules I had overlooked. If you survive, run east. Never look back. The mesas will guide you. I ran, sand under my boots, wind lashing against my face, my lungs burning. Behind me, the diner howled. The jukebox shrieked. My doppelganger's laughter echoed across the desert. I didn't stop. I didn't glance at the mesas. I followed instinct. The first faint light of dawn stretched across the horizon. By the time I slowed to a crawl, the diner had vanished. The desert lay empty, silent. I sat on the sand, shaking, bleeding from scrapes and bruises, trying to catch my breath. My hands still held the paper, trembling. The rules were still there. And I knew this. The diner hadn't let me go. Not really. It was patient. It waited. It was alive. And it would call me back. By the 7th night, I was a walking shadow of myself. Exhaustion and fear had fused into a raw, jittering nerve stretched to the breaking point. My eyes were bloodshot, my hands constantly trembling, every sound slicing through me like knives. And yet, I knew the diner would call me back. It always does. As I approached the mesas, the neon sign flickered violently, buzzing in rhythm with my pulse. The building itself seemed alive. The walls expanded and contracted as if it were inhaling, tasting the desert air, measuring my fear. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned like the cries of 1,000 trapped souls. Booths twisted, melted, and shifted as I walked. Shadows grew thick, crawling along walls, snaking across the ceiling. The air was dense, heavy, smelling of burnt grease and something metallic, blood. I reached for the paper in my pocket. Letters crawled across it, reforming. Rule 13, survival demands sacrifice. Trust nothing, not even yourself. 12:17 a.m. The name calling started immediately. Soft at first, like a whisper under a closed door, then louder. Behind me, in front of me, echoing across the warped diner. Luke. I ran toward the back door, remembering Rule 2. The back door must be locked by 12:45 a.m. My fingers fumbled with the deadbolt. The door rattled violently, as if something immense was pushing against it. I pressed my hand against the warped wood. Pain shot through my palm. Something cold, sharp, like ice-coated claws, scratched against my fingers. Then it stopped. Silence. I didn't breathe for several seconds. They came at me in waves. Skinwalker-like entities. Humans twisted, faces wrong, limbs bending impossibly. A man with the face of my own father, smiling cruelly, lungs hissing with unnatural breaths. A woman crawling on the ceiling, whispering my failures, twisting her neck in ways no human neck could twist. Children with hollow eyes, running at impossible speeds, laughing while their voices multiplied, echoing from every corner. I flung coffee at one, the liquid sizzling as it hit its flesh, only for it to vanish in a swirl of shadow. I swung the knife wildly. My own reflection appeared in the mirrored wall, grinning, mocking me. The diner pulsed like a beast, walls closing in, ceilings bending. I realized the building wasn't just alive, it was hunting me. Then I saw him, my twin, my mirror, standing at the far end of the diner, leaning casually against the jukebox, eyes glinting red with malice. "You've been running," he said, voice exactly mine. "Now you're mine," I charged, knife in hand. He laughed, a sound like shattering glass. Shadows erupted from the floor, coiling around my legs. I tripped, sprawling across the warped formica. Every mirror in the diner now held dozens of me, screaming, crying, clawing at reality itself. Some bled from their eyes. Others laughed while I struggled to get up. The jukebox played a warped, screaming melody, each note cutting into my skull like a blade. The rules screamed in my head. Do not resist the shape of yourself. Trust no one wearing your face. I realized then that the diner wanted me to surrender, to become like the doppelganger, to give in, to die, or be remade. 3:03, 3:33 a.m. Mirrors whispered. I could hear my own voice screaming my name from every reflection. I dodged each one, panicked, breath coming in ragged gasps. 4:11 a.m. The scratching wasn't under the floor anymore. It was inside my chest, inside my bones. Pain exploded in my chest and I collapsed to the ground, gasping. Shadows reached into me, trying to pull me apart. The jukebox screamed its final warning, but it was 4:27 a.m. The diner twisted into a maze of corridors, walls bending like molten metal. Something hit me in my mind. This is it. It's now or never. I ran blindly, trying not to look back, trying not to let the shadows catch me. Somehow, instinct guided me east, toward the mesas. Sand bit at my face, wind lashed me. Behind me, the diner screamed and pulsed like a dying, furious heart. The doppelganger appeared at every corner, every shadow, every reflection, always a step ahead, grinning, mocking, hissing my name. I didn't stop. I ran until my legs gave out. I crawled across the sand, bleeding, my lungs burning, sun barely cresting the mesas. I looked back once. The diner had vanished. Silent desert stretched in all directions, but I knew it hadn't truly let me go. I was alive. I had escaped. By the thinnest margin, the narrowest margin possible. But I survived. I never returned. I don't tell anyone where I worked. Some nights, when the wind whistles just right across the desert, I hear it. The buzz of neon, the scraping of claws under the floor, the faint whisper of my name. The diner waits, hungry, patient, and some part of me never left.